Everybody, hi there. My name is Paul Entis. I'm the TAM Institute for Jewish Studies Executive Director here at Emory University. I am delighted to be facilitating and moderating a panel tonight entitled Why Major or Minor in Jewish Studies. We have a great group of distinguished alums that I'm going to introduce to you in a second. But first, I want to start off with some welcome and opening thank yous to people that are involved. One, you'll see on your screen Professor Miriam Udell, who's the Judith London Evans Director of the TAM Institute. She just assumed this role at the beginning of the semester, and she is co-appointed in German studies and Jewish studies with a particular interest in Yiddish culture and Yiddish language. Also joining us in the background is Professor Ofra Yeglin, who's TIJS's Director of Undergraduate Studies and appointed in Middle Eastern and South Asian Studies, and we're glad that she's with us. Mallory Mibab is a longtime TIJS employee, even longer at Emory University. She's our Senior Academic Program Coordinator. If you major or minor, you will come in contact with her, and I believe some of the students or some of the alums on our panel may have interacted with her at some point. And finally, Brent Buckley, who is our Communications and Events Manager. Brent handled the publicity for tonight and all the tech related to tonight, and I am entirely grateful. He's not feeling 100%, but he's still with us, and we appreciate that deeply. When I began to pull this panel together, I looked at our alums and wanted to see what kind of career paths people are on, what jobs folks are doing. Unsurprisingly, I saw among our ranks our rabbis, college professors, less expectedly, quite a good handful of medical doctors and practicing attorneys. I saw a youth educator, a career coach, multiple fundraisers, a museum curator, a veterinarian, and a vice president for investment banking. So I looked at our wealth of possibilities and pulled 4 really interesting people who I'm really delighted will be here to sort of share their stories and answer some questions. I see we have about 18 people with us tonight, and I'm really delighted with the turnout. We're recording this, as you heard, and this will be available online for the next couple of years for students, parents, high school students who are thinking about Jewish studies as a possible major. So with us, we have Jennifer Laszlo Mizrahi, who graduated Emory in 1986. She's currently in Annapolis, Maryland. She majored in Judaic Studies, as it was called then, and in International Relations. I should add a couple things. One is I'm a major myself. I graduated in 92, and I'm not going to go through everyone's bio. You're going to have a chance to hear in their own voices sort of what they did at Emory and what they've done since. So I'm not going to be reading anything. I just wanted to give you just the most briefest of sketch. Second is Sarah Blenner, who graduated in 2007. She's in California. She graduated with highest honors, which we'll probably talk about tonight, in Jewish Studies and Anthropology. Joel Frankel is also from the class of 2007, classmates with Sarah. He has a BBA in finance from the business school and also majored in Jewish studies. He's coming to us from Columbia, Maryland. And Sydney Hertz graduated in 2017, our youngest alum here. She majored in Jewish studies and English. She's in New York City. I'm not sure if I mentioned Sarah's coming to us from California, so we appreciate her being here with the time difference. So let's jump in. We're going to do a round robin at first, and I'm going to call on each of our panelists to share a little bit about their journey in declaring a Jewish studies major. Was it straightforward? Was it circuitous? What went into your thinking to make that decision? And how did that all come together to be a Jewish studies major? And I'll begin with Jennifer Laszlo Mizrahi, please.
Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here, and I just have to say that I loved my Emory experience, and I am always thrilled that I chose Judaic Studies. I actually came in intentionally wanting to be a Judaic Studies major. I am a Jew from the South. I'm from Durham, North Carolina, so I grew up at Duke and really wanted to stay in the South if possible, and knew the outstanding faculty at Emory, and just that was my goal. I originally wanted to be a rabbi. I'm dyslexic, and with my dyslexia, I have a lot of trouble with Hebrew. And so I didn't become a rabbi partially because I just have so much trouble reading. But I am so pleased that I chose Judaic studies, and so much of my work has been in the Jewish community.
Terrific. Thank you. Sarah Blenner, please.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm delighted to be here. I'm always excited to connect with people from Emory. So I actually found I started going to Emory because of the Jewish community at the school, but I actually started as a pre-med major and realized it wasn't the route for me. I really love Jewish studies because of the interdisciplinary nature. So I loved how I could take classes from a variety of perspectives and kind of focus on one topic and learn about a lot of different disciplines. So that's kind of how I came to the major.
Joel.
First of all, I'm going to have to echo the same things that Jennifer and Sarah said. I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm honored to be asked to be on this panel. I wouldn't necessarily have considered myself a distinguished alum. So I'm grateful that someone else gave me that term, because it wouldn't have been something I would have called myself. I came to Emory University for two reasons, similar to Sarah in one way, because of the Jewish population and the percentage of Jews and the strong, vibrant Jewish community, but also to get a business degree. The only schools I applied to were those that had undergraduate business schools. And when I got to school, I started with my freshman seminar. I looked down the courses and I said, oh, Israeli politics and society. That sounds like a really interesting course. I would love to take that. And then I took that course. And I'm like, oh, this is really fun. I would love to take more of these courses. And the professor that I took that with also was leading a summer course. So I took his summer course and then just continued to take more and more Jewish studies courses, because every time I had a general education requirement, those were the classes that I was most interested in. And so I ended up with a Jewish studies major in addition to my business degree, because it was just the classes that I was most interested in taking. And eventually I got to that point where I was like, oh, I only need to take like one or two more to get that major. And so that's what I ended up deciding to do. And I was thrilled. What I really loved about it was also something similar that Sarah said, which is I got to hone a lot of skills, my writing skills, my reading comprehension skills, all the things that became very valuable within the humanities outside of what I was learning in the business school. I was able to really hone those skills within my Jewish studies major. And so I went about it a little circuitously or accidentally to some degree, but I was thrilled every time I got to take one of the Jewish studies courses.
Wonderful. Sydney, off to you.
Yeah, I have to echo all of my fellow panelists. It means so much to be here. I loved every minute of my time at Emory, and my Jewish studies major was a really, really big part of that. So really happy to be here. Yeah, so from the minute I knew I was going to Emory, I knew I wanted a Jewish studies major. Part of that was probably the attraction that so many people have to Dr. Lipstadt and her course, but just it felt right. I had never really studied Judaism academically, and the ability to do so in a secular environment was really enticing. And so I started right off the bat with a Yiddish culture course taught by Dr. Udell my first semester. And then similarly to Joel, all of a sudden I was very close to completing the major because I was just attracted to so many of the courses, and that's what I wanted to be taking. They were so fun and interesting, and it was a really good example of when you like what you're doing, it becomes really easy to do, not because the courses were easy, but because they were so interesting to me. I was excited to be doing the research and to be writing a paper, conducting a project. So I actually added on an English major later on because I think relatively quickly I was moving through the major requirements and was ready to take on something else. But the Jewish studies major was really core to my Emory academic experience.
Terrific. All right, so we're going to go back to another round robin, and we're going to move ahead a couple years. All of us got our degrees, ready to leave Atlanta potentially. Talk a little bit now about your career trajectory after graduation. What are some of the highlights professionally that you've done and been a part of? Not your full resume, but the most interesting things that you'd like to share. Let's start with Joel.
You're muted.
We'll never get old. I started my career in the business world. I worked for a mid-level startup in 2007 and then was laid off during the recession in 2007, 2008. Fortunately, I was able to get into what I wanted to do right out of college. Actually, I was a management consultant for a number of years. I worked for Nielsen Business Consulting Services. And I got to work on some really intellectually stimulating projects and work with lots of data that was really enticing to me. I got to work on projects that helped companies expand in the Philippines and France. I got to help work with major Fortune 500 companies here in the States. But what I didn't find necessarily with that job was the meaning and purpose that I was looking for in my career. I'm the epitome of a millennial, I guess, in that respect. So I wanted to try and do something different. So I tried to pivot a little bit. I went to law school at Washington University in St. Louis. And then after my first year, decided that actually wasn't the meaning I was searching for. Once again, very intellectually stimulating. But then I started working in the Jewish community, and I started working at the Jewish Federation of St. Louis. And I started my first role there as an Israel engagement professional, working with young adults who were going to Israel and coming back from Israel. And that's when I found that was my calling. When I was at Emory, I had a number of different internships. I worked for a sports agency. I worked for an accounting firm. Every single time I realized what I didn't want to do. And then eventually, after all those things that I didn't want to do, I found out what I did want to do. And so I was given a lot of opportunities within the Jewish Federation of St. Louis because I had mentors who were really wanted to cultivate my career trajectory. And I was able to add value to the organization in ways that others weren't, because I also had that finance background, which is atraditional in the Jewish field, in the Jewish communal services field, where most of the people who are coming there are coming from a social work background. So I had a number of different opportunities there to grow my career. And eventually it got to the place where I am today, which is what I'm most excited about, which is I'm the executive director of the Jewish Federation of Howard County, which is a small community about 25, 30 miles outside of Baltimore. And this is my dream job for this stage of my career, which is running an organization, running a Jewish communal organization. I get to learn a lot. I think one of the things that Emory gave me, and especially the Jewish studies curriculum, was I'm always learning, and I'm still always learning. I think that's an incredible attitude that I was able to develop because of the educators that I learned from at Emory, was that you're always going to be learning even after you get your degree. And so now I'm just constantly learning. I'm just learning on the job rather than learning academically.
Great. Sydney, please jump in.
Awesome. So after I graduated in 2017, I started working at a strategic advisory company called MediaLink. They work across media, tech, entertainment, and I started there. It was my dream job, truly. It was the one company I was really excited to work for. And I started there as a chief of staff to the chief growth officer. And then over time took on a few other operational roles before becoming like a full-time consultant, working with a bunch of media companies on monetization and growth strategies. I loved it. I truly would say I would have stayed there forever, but it was kind of the right thing for my growth to leave. So I decided to apply to business school, and I got in, which is great. I'm currently pursuing an MBA at Columbia University, but knowing that I was very interested in the world of venture capital, I spent the 6 months before starting, so maybe from March until August of this year, helping to run a venture syndicate in the e-commerce enablement space. And so I'm still on my, I would say, path of figuring out what exactly I will do, but I have about 1.5 years to figure it out since I'm back in school, but remain very interested in the world of venture. But I would call out, similarly to Joel, again, I took on a bunch of different internships at my time at Emory, really to help me determine what I wanted to do after graduating, which is the big question. And not only was the Jewish Studies department really helpful in getting some of those internships. For instance, I one summer worked at YIVO here in New York. Also, some internships I got independently, but I would say there were really important skills that I obtained through my major that I think have been critical to my success thus far. So I'm a huge believer in the liberal arts education, and I think my Jewish Studies major especially, of course, my English major helped to hone certain skills, but the really critical thinking that a Jewish Studies major brings about and encourages, I think has been instrumental in being a consultant and has served me really well, but being back in an academic environment. So that's a bit about me.
Thank you. Sarah, please.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. My internet froze for a minute, so I just wanted to make sure I'm connected again. So following undergrad, like many of my other peers, I just went kind of the law school route, and I went straight from undergrad to law school. And it was the night before I was starting law school, and all of a sudden I got really panicked, like, what am I doing? I don't know if this is the career path that I'm
Oh,
health. I hadn't heard about it before, but when I started reading about it, I realized that that's did you lose me? Or I'm still
for
there?
a second we did, but you're back. You're back.
Okay, great. So what I was saying is I got nervous before law school and I started reading about this Master's of Public Health program, and I realized that's actually what I wanted to do. My undergraduate thesis for the honors program was on non-traditional use of the mikvah, and there's actually a lot of public health themes in that. And so that's kind of where I realized that connection of, oh, I'm not interested in medicine, but I'm interested in public health, and I'm interested in how like cultures and religions can kind of foster positive health. So I pursued both degrees. Following law school, I was hired by my law school, and I ultimately served as the Center for Diabetes Research, as the director of the Center for Diabetes Research and Policy. A lot of my work focused around disability advocacy work. So I provided pro bono representation on behalf of individuals with disabilities, mostly kids with diabetes who are trying to get a free and appropriate public education. I did research, interdisciplinary work, some policy work as well in that role. It was really fun. And then my family and I decided to make the move to California, and I ended up working, now I work as the Director of Field Studies and Applied Professional Training at UCLA Fielding School of Public Health. I teach a number of courses there, mostly focused on experiential. Am I with you still? Everyone froze. Okay, great. And I wear a number of different hats. I run some training programs, do program design and implementation, as well as evaluation. It's a really fun role.
Thank you. Thank you. Jennifer, please.
So my path's a little different. I really love politics. And of course, poly is many and ticks are blood-sucking animals. So you wouldn't think it's something for somebody coming out of Judaic studies, but in my junior year at Emory, I did junior year abroad in Israel. I really, really loved it. And I got very involved in AIPAC, and AIPAC really showed me that you can meet elected officials, you can talk to them, you can build relationships with them, and you can really influence public policy. And so I've been really fortunate wearing a bunch of different hats to do a lot of work on public policy, whether it's in Israel or the United States. You know, I had my own consulting firm, started 2 nonprofits that wound up being, you know, multi-million-dollar organizations and that were successful with a positive social impact, always focused on Tikkun Olam. But in terms of the things that I'm most proud of or most excited about was when I was 23 years old, pretty much as a very new graduate of Emory with a degree in Judaic Studies, I organized the campaign training seminars in Ukraine for the Ukrainian independence campaign in 1989, 1990 that helped them become an independent country. Watching a Jewish president of Ukraine, you know, defend his people with such incredible passion and chutzpah. And I must tell you, there was so much anti-Semitism in Ukraine in 89 and 90. It was just absolutely dripping with anti-Semitism. And to see a Jewish president of Ukraine doing what he's doing, it's incredibly inspiring.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you. Let's jump into this idea of what are the skills, what are the lessons that a Jewish studies major brings into the world after you leave the university setting. I'm going to mention a couple that I brainstormed. Anybody who wants to raise their hand and say, yeah, that was true for me, this is how it played out, I'd love to hear that. One thing comes to mind is strong verbal and written communication. Anybody feel like that is something that that a Jewish studies degree gets you on the good path for? Jennifer, you're nodding. What do you think about that?
Well, so as I said earlier, I'm dyslexic, and so I have more verbal skills and less reading skills than most people. I also have ADHD, and I'm Jewish, so I have a lot of chutzpah, and I've now spent a huge amount of time in Israel, where I've been literally about 30 times. And Israelis, most people don't realize, are sort of all like old ladies. They're completely unfiltered. They say what they think directly. So the distance between my head and my mouth is not very long. And I think that sometimes people wish that I was a little, I don't know, softer, gentler, whatever, but nobody who I work with ever has to wonder what I think about something. And I find that saves a lot of time. And I grew up in the South, where people are very indirect. You know, they're very, very polite where I grew up. If they want to tell you no, they say, I'll do everything I can for you, which means I'll do nothing for you, because really you're just so sad. There's just like nothing I can do for you. But, you know, I do think in a Judaic studies program, you learn to really speak very directly.
Great, great. What about research and information analysis? Anybody feel like that's a skill that they started with and have taken with them? Sarah, I see a little nodding.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the Jewish Studies program actually helped me gain really strong research and analytical skills. I think one of the most meaningful experiences that I had at Emory was participating in the honors thesis program. It was by far the most challenging component of my experience, but it really created a well-rounded experience for me. And through doing that, I worked directly with Rabbi Michael Berger, and he really pushed me to be a critical thinker and gave me that one-on-one attention to solidify my research and analytical skills. So if you have the opportunity, highly encourage you to do that.
Great, great. What about cultural understanding or intercultural understanding? Joel, anything to add to that?
I think the best example I've got that is my writing requirement that I was required to take as a senior. I think it was called the writing seminar or something like that. I didn't do the thesis, but I had to, write extensively for that class, and it was on Israeli military history from 1948 to 1973. And I think one of the things I loved about that class specifically was, well, the topics, but also was the way that I had to learn what else was going on in the world between in that time period to understand the position that Israel was in as a fledgling country. And so while it wasn't necessarily different cultures, it certainly was understanding the scope of the world and how that was affecting the Jewish world at the time, and how that was just, a 30-year period in history, which is very different than the survey of Jewish history course that I think all majors and minors have to take. But it's certainly, going back to your first skill you mentioned, Paul, honing my writing requirements. I'm a numbers person. That's why I got my degree in finance, is going after that skill. So, but honing my research and writing skills, in addition to understanding, I'd say perspective, is what that class taught me a lot about, in terms of understanding the perspective of the world as it relates to this individual topic.
Moving on, wanted to get a sense, is there anyone or a couple of you who would want to talk about, was there a pushback when you were thinking about majoring or minoring in Jewish studies? Was there a family member who was not overly enthusiastic or said, gosh, if you get this degree, like, how are you going to take that and go to business school? Let me throw this first to Sydney. Like, it's not the obvious thing. I mean, business school people get their degrees in business and then they go on and get their MBA. So was there like a nervousness to have a Jewish studies English degree and then go get an MBA?
I love this question. I would say I have been very lucky that my parents are firm believers in do whatever the heck you want, just do a really good job at it and be your best at it. So there was no funny look when I said I wanted a Jewish studies major. Also wasn't that surprising, but I think there is a sentiment around where people are like, you're a what? And you have to have confidence, I would say, first in what you're doing and why you're doing it. If you're if you're pursuing a major or minor in Jewish studies, you're clearly interested in it. And I think that's amazing. I mean, in terms of skills and things that you get out of it, I think in a job application process or working in the world, people want to work with interesting people. And to have on your resume a Jewish studies major or minor, it says like you have a passion because you are an interesting human and you decided to do something about it and you weren't afraid of whatever that might mean in someone else's mind. So first, I think it's probably led to so many interesting conversations. Like when I tell people that I studied Yiddish instead of Hebrew undergrad, it leads to 1,000 questions as to why, or people that are incredulous that that was even offered. So I love that. I like to think I'm an interesting person. And so this goes with it. In terms of the major I mentioned earlier, or I'm sorry, in terms of business school, I mentioned earlier that I'm a big believer in a liberal arts education. And part of that is because I knew that I would probably want to pursue an MBA one day. And so I personally didn't understand why I would study business for 4 years and then study business for another 2 years, which a lot of people do, which is great for them. But for me, I thought it would make me way more well-rounded if I pursued 2 majors that I was really excited about and then went and honed whatever business specific skills I wanted to later on, which is what I've been doing. So that's that.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in with that? Okay. Another question. Thinking about your Emory experience in the Jewish Studies program, one thing that we're really sort of committed to now, and I'm guessing over the years have previously been committed to as a program, is both the classroom and outside the classroom experience. Are there things that you can think about that you pursued and had involvement with through Jewish Studies to some degree, but it was outside the classroom that was particularly memorable, particularly positive? Maybe it's an interaction with a specific faculty member, maybe it's an internship, maybe it's studied abroad. Have a couple of you please sort of jump in and share that.
I'm happy to jump in on this one because that Israeli politics and society seminar that I took my freshman year was taught with Professor Benny Hari, and he was incredibly impactful in my life in many, many ways. I actually still have friends who I probably haven't talked to them more than I should from those classes, and also from going on a summer study abroad program with him after my freshman year that traced Sephardic Judaism across Europe. And that was my only summer abroad program. My only study abroad program, because I did internships related to the business degree that I was getting every summer afterwards. And the relationship that I was able to cultivate with Benny and ask him about different things related to the Jewish Studies major, related to life in general, I really cherished that because I think it really helped me understand, coming from an environment where I didn't necessarily have the social skills, the soft skills necessary to develop relationships with those who were older than me. I was able to have a really cultivated and nurturing environment to be able to learn that soft skill because I was able to develop that relationship with him.
So I'll jump in and say that the Hillel rabbi, Danny Allen, and I were very, very close, and he stayed a very close mentor of mine until he passed not so long ago. And he was just incredibly helpful in my career. The junior year abroad in Israel was incredibly, incredibly helpful to me. But my involvement in APAC as a student was very, very important. But ultimately, what you learn in Judaic studies and just being Jewish is what happens to Jews if they don't speak up, if they don't, if they don't fight against anti-Semitism or bigotry of all kinds, not just against our community, but against all communities. And how my extracurriculars there really showed me the kind of impact that you can have. And I've been very lucky in my career. I mean, in the last several decades, I've met and worked with every president of the United States and every prime minister of Israel and ambassadors from 85 different countries. And I've met one-on-one with 48 of America's governors. And I think a lot of that comes from my Judaic studies background. That really taught me that, that you have to act as if your life depends on it, because your life really does depend on it, and that you can do it. im tirtzu ein zo agada, if you dream it, you can do it. And I think the Jewish studies background really teaches that and really instills that. And also because, the idea of every Jew was at Sinai, whether they had a disability or they were male or female or old or young or gay or straight or whatever, every Jew was at Sinai. Every person is equal. The idea that all of us can make a difference, that none of us has to complete the task, that all of us just has to do our part to the task. All of that of being Jewish really has led to my career and has been very richly rewarding for me. And I will also say that as a parent, it's helped me also that, at the end of the day, my most important job is to be a parent. It's my favorite job. And I think that, that a Judaic studies background also makes me a better member of my family and my community.
Terrific, thank you. This is a question for Sarah. As we talked about skills that you can take away from the Judaic studies, the Jewish studies degree, one that we talked a little bit about was critical analysis, sort of being able to look at a situation, look at a text, analyze it critically, and dig deep. Your work now in the field of public health, and even in the sort of previous work with diabetes and pro bono law work, doesn't necessarily fit squarely into the idea of you were taking the survey of Jewish history. But how do you feel like those initial courses that you took and the honors thesis lifted you up to be able to do these things that have a medical sort of inclination and not one that we would think of automatically as, oh, a Jewish studies major is going to go into what Sarah is doing?
Absolutely. So I think that Jewish studies major really positioned me to take on anything because it gave me such a wide array of skills. And it also really helped me to be able to spot issues and to think innovatively. And I saw that throughout all of the classes that I took through the Jewish studies department and also through my honors thesis work as well. I think the class that really prepared me the most, I would say, other than the honors thesis, would be Dr. Berger's Jewish law class. And that law, so Jewish law is based on a case law situation, just like American law. I mean, obviously it's different, but those skills like really helped me to be prepared to go to law school and to think critically about ethics and about how different fact patterns might apply in different scenarios. One of the things, a lot of my work now focuses on interprofessional collaboration, and I really believe it's the Jewish Studies program and the training that I received that helps me be able to be in a room with doctors, with nurses, with dentists, with lawyers, with any other type of professional, and really help us find a commonality and really be able to use each other's strengths to accomplish whatever goals we're working towards. So I can't speak highly enough about the Jewish Studies program. I don't think there's any other department at Emory or in any other university that could prepare you more for a wide range of fields.
That's very nice, very nice.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about networking. I think there's some seniors, some juniors in our audience today. What would you say the importance of networking has been in your career, in your post-Emory life? Has Jewish studies fit into that or not? But I just wanted to make sure that we could do a shout out for what LinkedIn and the like, but more personal connections have helped you again in sort of getting to where you're at now.
I think that's actually really easy for me to take in some ways because as I mentioned earlier on, I got laid off after my first job after I'd been in my career for a year. And the way I got my next job was because a classmate of mine from the business school at Emory, I put feelers out there to people who might be, know of anything. And she helped me get an interview for a company that she had been consulting with. And that was my foot in the door in that company, I would say. And then I would say that once I got into the Jewish communal field, networking has been absolutely paramount, not only to be able to help me understand how other people do their jobs, but so that I can constantly be learning from others. and constantly be looking for mentors and constantly looking for people who want to just talk about the things that are important to me. The most important thing about networking, this is kind of building on something that Sydney said, is people are interested in talking to interesting people, but more than anything, people are interested in talking to people who are passionate about the things that they're passionate about. And so when it comes to me in Judaic studies and now working in the Jewish communal field, one of the things I can say is I want to talk to people who are interested in the things that I'm interested in. And I get that sense as well. But I would not be where I am today in my career without the networking that comes with the work that I have to do. But I will say that it's also been amazing when other people from Emory or other people from my career paths have reached out to me and asked me questions about things that they might want to focus on. Networking is always a two-way street. It's almost always more about giving than it is receiving. And if you go into networking with that in mind, you're going to be better off to be able to provide for yourself and for others in the future.
So I'm going to jump in on that because I am an obsessive LinkedIn person. You know, when I meet people or if I'm on a Zoom and somebody says something interesting, I like instantly try and get connected to them on LinkedIn. If I read the newspaper and I read an article and there's a quote by somebody that's really interesting, I reach out to them on LinkedIn. If I'm going into a new sector or if I'm going to a conference, I look up all the speakers and I try and connect to them on LinkedIn before I even go to the conference. And you'd say, well, you know, I'm not looking for a job. Why is that interesting? So I personally was very passionate about this last election. There were 11 swing Senate seats, 11 swing Senate seats. So what could I do from home other than write checks? I literally just went on LinkedIn and you can organize your contacts by what state they're in. And in all 11 states, I knew at least 300 people that I could reach out to on LinkedIn and say, hey, you know, I'm really excited about this candidate and I hope that you'll get involved. And I was reaching out to them on LinkedIn and people were, you know, does everybody write you back? No, but a huge number of them write you back and they're very excited to connect because they see they know somebody in common with you, you have something in common with them. And so LinkedIn is my most active way that I connect to people, particularly during the pandemic. It's, you know, it's very user-friendly to do things from home and just get on Zoom with people.
Great, great.
I would love to echo that. I think for students, at least the students I work with, networking can be a little bit intimidating. So I just want to take a moment to say that it's really important to think about it as relationship building more than anything, just kind of in that professional context. And so if you approach it instead as networking and instead of networking more as building those relationships and those professional contacts, it can really be helpful. But I echo what Joel and Jennifer said, it's really important.
Sydney, I wanted to ask you a question. You mentioned an internship that you did with YIVO.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about how that came to be, what you got out of it, and how that sort of was part of your Jewish studies jigsaw puzzle experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I'll just add on the last note that the Career Center was pretty helpful for helping me learn how to network early on. So definitely use them. I doubt things have changed so much since I was there. But I remember people feeling like in the business school, they were really supported from a recruiting standpoint, not always as much so in the college. So definitely use the Career Center. But I have to say my YIVO internship, I'm pretty sure Dr. Udell gets all the credit there for making that introduction on my behalf. This was this summer going into my junior year. And Dr. Udell had already written me a reference for a different internship I wanted at the time. And then I was kind of figuring out what I was interested in. I knew I was spending part of the summer interning for a media company and had some more time and wanted to, I'm assuming, kind of do something pertaining to my major and interest in Jewish studies. So I ended up interning at YIVO a few days a week, helping them with development. At the time, they were publishing a really interesting book. Someone had found a Jewish Yiddish cookbook that had survived the Holocaust somehow, and like some of the recipes were actually delicious, and so they were bringing it back. And so that was a big effort that summer. It was an amazing experience. It's actually was the first and really only time that I worked in a nonprofit from the like business side in the back office and really learned what was going on there. And it was amazing. I loved it. So that is a really good example of using, I would say, like the Jewish Studies department, not only academically, but I have to just say it was all Dr. Udell, but she was so incredibly helpful at so many different points in my determining, figuring out my career and internships. And she found the name of the cookbook. So there you go.
One thing I wanted to bring up, was one of the things that I've heard sort of in multiple ways was the importance of the significance of study abroad. Sometimes in Israel, sometimes in Europe, sometimes for a semester, sometimes for a year, sometimes for a summer. Just a plug to the current students who are on the Zoom webinar. We're doing an inaugural program this year through Jewish Studies, and it's a 10-day, 1-credit experience, study abroad in Poland, where we'll be going to Krakow and Warsaw. And Professor Eli Schenker, jointly appointed in history and Jewish studies, is going to be leading it. It's highly subsidized by a very generous donor. And the goal is really to get to Poland and not to be sitting in a hotel with lectures, but it's all sort of on the ground, meeting Ukrainian Jewish refugees who are in Poland, meeting Hillel students at the University of Warsaw, doing a cemetery restoration project, an old Jewish cemetery, going to a klezmer concert, doing some concentration camp related sort of visits. Polin, the Jewish Museum of Poland, will be visiting. And so one thing you're hearing is that whatever chance you can get to study abroad, whether it's 10 days or a year, if you can make it work, and because we've got the financial support to help, you should consider it.
You should definitely consider that. That sounds so amazing. Yeah, I want to go. That sounds amazing.
That sounds great.
We've gotten some positive feedback from the community. We've thought about down the road, should we run an alumni trip? This course is going to be sort of a complement to a 3-credit spring semester course called the History of the Jews of Eastern Europe, History 338. Some students will take that course and then be prepared for the 1-credit 10-day trip in May. Others will just do prerequisite readings because their spring semesters are already full and busy. But we're trying to figure out new ways of connecting with different students. Majors and minors are welcome, and non-majors and minors are welcome as well. I want to make sure that we have a chance to turn it over to Professor Udell and take 15 minutes to sort of tease out questions that I didn't pursue, that you find interesting. I love having sort of a non-academic sort of raise some of these topics, and an academic who's sort of shepherding these academic lives and now seeing what people are doing. Jump in, please.
Yeah, we get so little longitudinal data. It's incredibly exciting to just hear about what each of you is doing and, how you understand the role of Jewish studies at Emory and preparing you to chart these wonderful courses that you have and that you are. I want to first just encourage those who are listening to use not the chat function, but the Q&A function if you have questions that you would like to pose. And while I'm waiting for that to populate, I'm going to just start us off with a couple of questions. So first, and I would really like to hear about this from everyone if you don't think that you've already addressed it, but it was a kind of recurrent theme that there was exploration and that you learned what you didn't want to do and the things that didn't quite feel right. When you got to the thing that felt right, how did you know? Could I ask you to kind of drill into what the feeling was or what the thoughts were and how you knew, okay, this is where I want to spend my time and my energy? Sarah, would you start for us?
Absolutely. I have to say I like doing a lot of different things. Kind of the path that I went on is just to follow open doors and to take advantage of the different opportunities. And I found things that I really enjoy in pretty much all of the roles that I've done. So it's hard for me to pinpoint an exact kind of moment. One thing that I do like to tell students is that kind of your first job out of school or that first internship, it's just your first job or your first internship. And so really try to think about those key skills or those key takeaways that you can kind of use in your path moving forward.
So I will add that the summer internship opportunities is important, that to the extent that while you're in college to try and get experience, and if you can financially afford it, to do something interesting. I mean, I did an internship at the Israeli consulate in Atlanta, and it was fantastic. I worked on John Lewis's very first congressional campaign and helped him win his congressional seat for his very first election for Congress, and he became, of course, such an important civil rights leader. So I think the summers are also important. But I will also say, Professor, that I don't think it's important today to have one career goal. I think the important thing today is to have resiliency. I think we're going into a global crisis because of the climate situation, where we could have massive political instability, mass migration, all kinds of situations that could cause people to have to change their careers, their locations, their nationalities multiple times. It's something we Jews are very good at. And I feel very good about the fact I have a Judaic studies degree, because what I know from learning about Jewish history is no matter how terrible things got for Jews, we never lost our soul. We never lost our nefesh. We never lost creativity. We never lost our ruach, our spirit. And I think that one of the beauties about the Judaic studies career or study is that you build that resiliency and the knowledge of how to make a very humane, very rich life, even when things are very, very trying.
Great, thank you. Joel, what was the click when you felt like, all right, these were the right pieces coming together?
It actually came down to my first supervisor in the Jewish world. I had about 7 supervisors, direct supervisors, in the 10 years I spent at the Jewish Federation of St. Louis. And I learned a lot from what not to do and what to do from each one of those. And so I would say your supervisor at your first job might be more important than what you're actually doing at your first job, I would say. But I started just talking with him about the goals that I was trying to achieve in the work. And I loved it. I loved talking about the goals and the impact that I was going to be able to make on an individual and a collective level. And I was inspired. I was just inspired by my job in a way that I hadn't been inspired before. And so he helped me realize that was where I was supposed to be.
Great. Sydney, how about for you?
Yeah, I would say I'm still partially on the path, but of like figuring out what that is. But yeah. I think what the major showed me is that I said this earlier, when you like what you're doing, it's really fun. Like when it comes naturally in a certain way, or there's a part of it that is enjoyable, it becomes so, it's like, what your parents say, like your job's not a job if you love, it doesn't feel like work. And so I try to hold on to that. And I think the jobs that have been right for me are the ones that are tied most to like what I already know are my greatest skill sets. And so when being a people person or liking to do research and then articulate that becomes part of the job description, that part is really fun. And of course you want to still be challenged. But I have found success in kind of always looking for what comes naturally to me and then trying to build on that.
Okay, great. I see that in the Q&A, we have more of a comment than a question, and that is just a shout out for our curricular administrator, Mallory Mibab, that she is the best, and that is indeed true. And she's had such longevity that I think probably many of our panelists have interacted with her. So yes, absolute agreement there. The next question that I'm going to put out to the group is about whether there was a course or a path not taken in the course of your undergraduate experience or beyond? Is there something where, you know, you wish you had gotten into this class, or there's a certain road that you didn't go down and you feel some ambivalence about it? Would anyone like to just start addressing that, Joel?
I have to say this because somehow I ended up getting a Jewish studies major from Emory University without taking either Ken Stein's course or Deborah Lipstadt's course. And I regret both of those decisions immensely. And it had to do with the fact that I was in the business school as well. And I didn't have all the time I could take, but I regret not taking those courses. And I regret not, because their professors are, those professors specifically, that's why you go to Emory.
They're icons.
To learn from those types of professors. And so while like I said, I had a great personal relationship with Dr. Hari and I love taking his courses, I should have taken some other ones. I missed that.
Okay, all right. Anyone else have a regret or a
I didn't get into Dr. Stein's class either. And then I think he may have gone on something happened. I lost the opportunity, but I did get a Dr. Lipstadt class and it was amazing. And I have to say, I read her most recent book and then emailed her because right as I read it, it was about anti-Semitism here and now. And then, you know, what we all know what the last few years have been. She answered and I felt it just felt very special to be able to converse with her on such a relevant topic, but didn't get a Dr. Stein course. So I'm with Joel on that one.
Okay. All right.
I did take a course with Dr. Stein and it was awesome. So I highly encourage you to do that. I do feel badly I missed Dr. Lipstadt's class, though. I audited it, but it's not actually taking it.
Okay. All right.
Yes,
Jennifer put something very important in the chat. Would you say more about that also, Jennifer?
Yeah, so no matter what you do in the nonprofit space, fundraising ultimately is a big part of it, as Joel can tell you better than me. You know, there's an expression, the golden rule in nonprofits is he, she, or they who has the gold makes the rules. And if you don't have the money to carry out your vision, you just can't do it. So knowing how, so I agree with Joel and with Sydney that having some business background is really important because you need to spend your money in a very smart way. And you need to have a business plan. Like every time you set a goal, you need to have a plan, a very, very specific plan on how you're going to achieve it. And you have to have metrics for success. Like, how are you going to measure whether you hit that goal or not? And if you're on your journey and you see that the way you're doing it isn't working, how are you going to pivot to adapt to come up with a new plan? But ultimately, you have to learn to raise money. And so there's a nonprofit called candid.org that has all kinds of free classes that you can take online. You can just watch on Zoom. They have recordings, or you can sign up for a class that maybe you spend a nominal amount of money. That knowing how to fundraise is incredibly important. I mean, I've started multiple organizations and I'm 58, so I'm probably the oldest on the panel here. But I've had to raise over $100 million in my career, over $100 million. And learning how to fundraise is really, really, really important.
All right, great. We have just a few more minutes and okay. Yeah, please.
So I have a closing question I think is a good one for the panel. It's a round robin. And that is, what is something that you'd want to tell your first year self? Sort of in retrospect, with hindsight, is there something that you would gently share that I think other students currently might find of interest? Why don't we start with Sydney?
Yeah, this feels very relevant because I would use the same reminder for myself now. And this is a promise I made to myself starting business school, which is don't get too caught up in what everyone around you is doing. It is really okay to figure out what works for you and what gets you excited, be it a major, an extracurricular, an internship, a career. Like there are a lot of people at school with a lot of different goals, and those don't have to be your goals. And I think the hardest thing of all in college is being true to yourself and figuring out what makes you excited. And so as I've said, that for me was this major. I truly found a home within Emory. I always tell people this. I went to multiple professors' homes for dinner. That is not normal. Not everyone gets to do that. And I only got to have that because I was honest with myself about what I was excited about and interested in. So that's the advice I would give.
Great. Sarah, what about you?
Yeah, so the advice I would give to my first year self is to not focus too much on the grades or the outcomes of any specific course, to really focus more on kind of gaining the experience and learning the skills and thinking about how it all might apply. Because at the end of the day, the grade isn't what really matters. It's kind of the lessons learned and what you can take from your overall experience. And to enjoy, because college is really fun.
Joel, please.
Who you spend your time with says a lot about who you are and who you will be. And I mean that from which professors you choose to try and ask for mentorships, the peers and the friends that you are making, whether you're working or not, part-time or full-time while you're in school. Who you spend your time with makes a difference in who you're going to become. And those people will, like, for many of us, you know, I was actually thinking about Sarah. I actually remember now when I was visiting a friend in law school or in Chicago, and you were in law school with them and you knew them, the relationships that you will make at Emory are critical. It's one of the reasons why you go to Emory, is for the people that you're going to be learning with and learning from. So who you spend your time with and how you spend your time really makes a difference.
Jennifer.
I couldn't agree with Joel more. I will also say that the people I met at Emory that, you know, that my very best friends today, you know, at age 58, I met in my freshman dorm at Emory when I was, you know, 18 and 19 years old, that I'm still in touch with them very, very regularly. Some, you know, not everyone, but a couple of people that I'm still very, very much in touch with. Who you spend your time with really, really does matter. But I think that you should not limit to the people that you happen to have around you. For me, I'm always looking for interesting people that are doing interesting things. And I'm always reaching out to ask them, would they give me 15 minutes of their time? And can I meet them either on Zoom or on phone, or buy them a cup of coffee? And that just reaching out, everybody will share time with you and give you an informational interview, or just, you know, give career advice or answer a question. That there's almost nobody, like Sydney said, that she reached out to Professor Lipstadt, who was my camp counselor, you know, at Brandeis Bardeen Institute, you know, that these people do write you back and they do want to help, and just not to be shy to go out, and then of course send them thank you notes and stay in touch. It's just, you know, networking so you can meet interesting people and learn from them is just the best.
Well, my goal was to keep this to an hour, and I think we're going to do it exactly that. I want to end with my real appreciation and gratitude for amazing colleagues who are alums together. Brent is an alum of Emory as well, and Professor Udell is a wonderful colleague. But I think this is a taste of what Jewish studies can offer and provide. We're a small program. Some years we'll have 3 or 4 graduating majors and minors. I think it allows for a more personal experience. You're going to get to know the staff. You're going to get to know the faculty in deeper, hopefully more meaningful ways than nothing against the econ department that has 70 graduating seniors. But there's something special about that. And it's a real nice moment for me as an alum to come back 30 years later to work for the program, the institution that I care deeply about. If there are folks who want to connect with people individually, shoot me an email. I'm happy to make those connections. Clearly, this group is a fan of LinkedIn, so get there and make those connections. I hope that we'll do this again and hear other voices, but just to close the night, thank you all for your time. Thank you to the participants. We were up to close to 20 at one point who were interested in hearing stories and experiences. I imagine that you're going to walk away uplifted and excited and somewhat nostalgic for those of us who remember our days on campus. So have a good night, Lila Tov, and we will be in touch with our newsletters and such in the not too distant future. Bye-bye.
Thank you.